Civilization of the Mayans first started to appear on the Yucatan Peninsula in the time span between 2600 BC and 1800 BC, in the land which would later become known as Guatemala and parts of Belize and El Salvador. Most of the Mayan diet came from corn, along with beans and squash. Mayans also had many avocado and tomatoes. For meat, the Mayans hunted deer, peccary, turkeys, quails, ducks, curassow, guan, spider monkeys, howler monkeys, the tapir, armadillo, and sometimes dogs. The Mayans also loved chocolate, but they never sweetened it and always consumed them in liquid form. The Mayans typically wore loose garments. For example, females wore skirts over blouses, and males wore loincloths. They also had blankets known as mantas. Most Mayan gods resembled a part of nature, like sun god, for example. Many rituals were part of Mayan culture, including bloodletting and human sacrifice. The Mayan did not practice human sacrifice to the extent that the Aztecs did, and the numbers of human sacrifices from Spanish reports for the Aztecs and the Mayans were greatly exaggerated. But to say human sacrifices were not a part of Mayan culture would be to tell a lie. The Mayans thought human blood was nourishment for the gods, and the gods would get angry and punish them if they were not fed. The most famous art of the Mayans was pottery, where they would put designs on clay pots, bowls, and other water-containing creations. They also made many stone sculptures, such as tablets and stelas. Stelas are elongated slabs of stone with carvings and inscriptions. The Mayans also carved wood and painted. The Mayans were very set up when architecture is concerned. The average Mayan lived in a hut, but there were also many cities in the Mayan Empire, and many people lived in said cities. The buildings making up these cities were mostly either made of wood or stone slabs. Massive structures were created by the Mayans for religious rituals. These structures were so massive, in fact, that when the Spanish conquistadores arrived, they asked their commanding officers if they were dreaming when they saw them. The Mayans also built many pyramids. The Mayans were generally very peaceful compared to the Aztecs to the north and the Incas to the south. But when the Mayans were trifled with, they were a force to be reckoned with. The Mayans used spears made of obsidian and chert for close range and bows and arrows for long-distance engagements. Mayan offensive tactics consisted of devastating the opposing force with long-distance arrow fire, followed with a massive spear charge. These tactics are actually very similar to musket warfare that the Europeans used from the creation of the firearm all the way to the First World War, where the invention of the first machine gun made large-scale charge is quite useless. The Mayans created several new technologies, which are now commonplace, but when they were first invented, they were absolutely genius. The Mayans were the first to have a complex understanding of place value, and as such, had much more understanding of mathematics than Europe for a very long time. The Mayans invented the first modern calendar. The Mayans also made many strides in astronomy, even figuring out how to determine crop seasons by looking at the stars. These are just a few of the technologies created by the Mayans. The history of the Mayan Empire came to a screeching halt when the Spanish conquistadores came. The Mayans fought valiantly against the Spanish, but eventually, knowing they would never win against a much superior force, surrendered, unlike the Aztecs who fought to the death. A little less than 300 years after the fall of the Mayan Empire in 1812, Mexico and Central America gained independence from the Empire of Spain, and later Guatemala would gain independence from Mexico, spiritually reviving the Mayan Empire. Now, Guatemala is merely a shell of its former Mayan greatness due to economic scarring from the Spanish Empire and later American coups. Fun facts! The Mayan people never completely died out. They exist in their former lands of Central America and southern Mexico. Most modern-day Latinos are partially descended from the Mayans, and many pure-blood Mayans also exist. Their languages also still exist, with some of the languages existing in the former lands of the Mayans including Quiche, Yucatec, Mam, and Nahuatl. The Mayan Empire was most famous for making many people think the world was going to end on December 21st, 2012. This was very obviously fake. Or was it? Maybe we are all dead spirits who have not moved on. That was the project. I hope you enjoyed.